Outer Wilds is a fun, cheery game about exploring the solar system and discovering the ruins of a long-dead civilization of technologically advanced alien folks called the Nomai. It's also a goddamn horror game, which no one told me about. So with that out of the way, let me tell you about the excellent exploration extravaganza of one of the most beautiful and best games ever made. This is the Outer Wilds experience. You play as one of these fellows, and since a picture says 1,000 words, this is what they're sending you into space in. Thanks, guys. After a quick trip to the observatory to obtain the launch codes, to set up some foreshadowing, and to give this devilishly handsome statue the bedroom eyes, we can finally take off in this lovable pile of garbage. The game pretty heavily implies that your first voyage should be to somewhere safe, and not full of cosmic horrors, so of course I decide to go to this hellhole, which, barring a massive sign yelling, "Do not enter," couldn't possibly be more inviting. Now, the special thing about Dark Bramble is that some of these lights belong to these creatures, which I'm reasonably sure disprove the existence of God just by existing. And they target you based on sound, so I think you know where this is going. Yeah, I fluked my way into an area I had absolutely no right to be in. In the long run, this probably made everything worse for me, because I still didn't know that these things were still alive. I sure was in for an emotional maelstrom of pain and suffering on my next visit. But instead of becoming anglerfish food, it was this that gave me my first death. Well, other than this one, we don't count that. So, to anyone who's played Outer Wilds before, that song might have given you some mild PTSD, and to the uninitiated, that's because the foreshadowing from about 2 minutes ago was actually foreshadowing the whole time! I believe the principle is called Chekhov's sun. If the sun is stated to be in the sky, then it must have exploded by the end of the chapter. And I avoided that by lightly bumping into a rock. Well, either way, it appears we're in a time loop now, so I'll be generous and provide the loop number in the top left-hand corner of the screen. It'll be important later, trust me. My next voyage led me to Giant's Deep, the most planety-looking planet in the game, at least from the outside. But just as with an onion, this planet has layers. I'm not kidding, this is only the second layer of 4. It's supposed to be one of the larger discoveries in the game as well, figuring out how to descend ever deeper into the giant, but of course I have a death wish and drive into one of the tornadoes just to see what would happen. It's time for some tornado safety lessons. If you ever encounter a massive spinny water boy, don't fret. If it's turning counterclockwise, that is, as it'll only pull you downwards to the ground. Now, God help you if it's spinning clockwise, cause unless you live next to the pillow factory, you might want to get out of there. You see, these tornadoes shoot you off the planet, upwards, and this single tornado sends you deeper into the planet's core. Guess which one I randomly picked? Yeah, of course. But there's still one more layer of trickery ahead, as the innermost section is electrified off. But because of the absolute lunacy of my first loop, I encountered Felspar's jellyfish. So I actually had the clue to solve this problem. Ha ha! Take that, look! I once again find myself in an area that there's no way I should be in, and the literal first Nomai artifact I interact with is one of the most important. This little room contains the coordinates to a destination called the Eye of the Universe. This is like a third of what you need to complete the game, and I completely fluked my way into obtaining it in the first hour. But fear not, for we've reached Rock Top. It's only down from here. Oh, and I actually died to the sun's blast this time. Not that I knew that, of course, I kinda just thought I died to a hearth attack. Speaking of dying, next loop starts a disconcertingly common theme of dying because I didn't put my suit on. You had one job, brain. On top of a lack of cognitive function up there, it seems my experimental luck has also run out, as unfortunately that eject button is actually functional. I mean, props to the game for actually including that. I'm just a bit salty that I tried to call it out on missing functionality and got such immediate karma. I was too amazed to even realize the mortal peril I was in. The next thing I found was what tipped me off to the fact that this game is really special. It might seem pretty mundane, but this teleporting poem was such a strange, cryptic part of the world, and it really made me excited to find more stuff like it. I think it's such an interesting, unique concept. It was one of those things I'd never be able to come up with, but was able to immediately realize the idea's potential. I even checked for a blink button in the settings to see if I could affect the poem without strictly looking away, which would turn out to be scarily prophetic. This was also the first loop I witnessed the supernova, and if I hadn't already decided the game was special before, this would have been the metal girder that broke the camel's back. I was so stun-locked that I reverted back to my primal marshmallow roasting tactics to appease the sun gods. Next stop was Brittle Hollow, where I meet with Ryback. Tripping and dumb luck, you say? Well, I can't have someone cramping my style, so I hurl myself into the black hole in the center of the planet to prove a point. I don't find much on the other side, just some pain and suffering for later me. We'll get back to that. Unfortunately for me, I spot an object orbiting the sun at the start of Loop 6 and try to land on it. I failed. Any reasonable person would have moved on here. It's clear I'm not a skilled enough pilot to actually board this thing. But I have an indomitable will and/or am very spiteful, so I decided to brute force a successful landing. In fact, this might take a while, so I've allocated a special region of the screen just for my failed attempts. The loop counter is also in jeopardy because of my hubris, so I'm gonna implement a special ruling that says the sun station attempts don't count towards the actual number, but I'm still gonna update it with a plus X amount for each failure right next to the quote-unquote real count. While we're waiting on me to learn how to land on not the sun's surface, let's continue on with actual progress. Well, progress might be a strong word for it, but I craft a masterful plan to try to break the game once again. I hypothesize that, if I can go fast enough, I can break through the currents on Giant's Deep and access the third layer without a tornado. Here's a handy diagram. You can see that if I build up speed for 20 minutes, I can go fast enough to be completely outside the currents wall on one frame, and completely inside the currents wall on the next, so the game won't push me back. Theoretically, anyway. Why I'd do this, you may ask? Because I like breaking things. Do I need more explanation? But Outer Wilds is made of sterner stuff than I thought, and even seemed to accommodate my style of buffoonery, as I got an achievement for my troubles. Remember that place I've dematerialized in when I leapt through the black hole? Well, here it is again, only not collapsed. But I don't realize that, so I try to cheese my way into it. I get given a warning from Hollow's lantern to stop being a moron, but nothing was gonna stop me from getting my ship absolutely, irrevocably, immutably stuck between this thing's pillars. I even tried the eject button again, I'm that desperate. I reset to get another ship, and this time I stalled just long enough to realize that I wasted like 30 minutes trying to access a building I already explored. Once again, I am too late to fully traverse the region on the other side of the black hole as well. Either way, the knowledge of the tower is of no use to me. It's basically all gibberish about a North Pole and a quantum moon. I am intrigued though, so I follow a quantum signal to what might be my favorite individual area in the game. Welcome to the Giant's Deep Tower of Quantum Imaging. This place's shtick is the constantly teleporting objects in each room. These objects include the exit tunnel. The lesson to be learned here is that, just like with the Wandering Poem, any object that exhibits this teleporting ability can only do so while not being observed. And that includes pictures. And here I thought that the scout was just there to let me do this with it. Learning this and having to apply it on the fly while racing against the sun clock made for some surprisingly fun and intense puzzle solving. The whole time issue was not helped by the scout's insistence on clipping through the floor though. It took until Loop 11 for me to get to the Hourglass Twins. My first job was to verify my gamer card by first trying navigating through this cactus crevice. After breezing through that, I was rewarded by my insatiable thirst for danger, and thrust myself into this huge sand pillar right on top of the hardest to find secret in the game. Before immediately backstepping into the teleporter and being very confused. At least I'm not as bamboozled as Chert, though, as this random astronaut just flew up to them, said the sun was going to explode, but that's okay because we're in a time loop, and then killed themselves on the bonfire. What kind of senseless lunatic would do that? Oh my god, that took a long time, but the Sun Station has been accessed. I learned that there's no nefarious conspiracy to blow up the Sun, it's just reached the end of its natural life cycle. Also, the Nomai wanted to blow up the Sun for science, but obviously failed. Back to that first part though, as it's not only our Sun that's dying. Throughout the 22-minute cycle of the game, you can clearly see other stars in the galaxy going supernova as well. Enough to the point that is very concerning. In fact, the map screen changes very drastically within these 22 minutes. Star after star exploding in this morbidly beautiful dance of death. It's a small detail that many will miss, but it's not just our solar system dying, it's the whole universe. On Loop 12, I finally see what's on the other side of the black hole. Not even by going through the black hole, just by spotting the corresponding white hole and flying over. But it's a teleporter, wow! I head back to the Hourglass Twins to try to get back to that strange room I stumbled upon, but was distracted by my first sighting of the Quantum Moon. Well, first as in the first time I realized it isn't usually located here. Of course it disappears when I fly in, but I track it down, use the rule of quantum imaging to lock it in place, and I'm in. I notice this weird tower thing and recall that it should be at the North Pole, but in order to get it there I need to figure out how to get to the North Pole myself. And this is where that prophetic blink button comes back into play, as I close the tower door and flick off my flashlight so that no one is observing the tower. To my delight, my theory works, and the tower moves, with me inside it. I use this to get to the North Pole and end up at the 6th location. I have to interject here just to say that the Quantum Moon and its mechanics were absolutely my favourite part of the game. They were so intriguing and creative. When it comes down to it, Outer Wilds is a game about exploring and finding solutions to the mysteries of the solar system, and I think it says a lot that this much thought and work went into the Quantum Moon when it's not even a necessary part of the puzzle to complete the game. It's like when a complimentary side dish is almost as good as the main course. Back to the 6th location though. Its visuals are really impressive. I'm caught looking up at this whirling vortex in the sky as I walk forward, and I'm so focused on it that when I look back down, I get jump scared by the fact that there's another living being in this place. Not just a living being, but a living Nomai even. This is surprising considering the numerous corpses around the place. Her name's Solanum, and after 6G's 2 conversations with her, I'm practically a quantum expert. She also doesn't actually exist, the moon just stole the idea of her existence and used it to show us a Nomai. Either way, even being wherever the 6th location isn't enough to save us from the sun exploding, but our death screen is a little bit different this time. The last major planet I've yet to explore at this point is Ember Twin. I get a good first impression with this anglerfish fossil. I still don't even know that these things are alive in Dark Bramble yet, by the way. I eventually find my way into the High Energy Lab, where the Nomai were conducting experiments to find out why their teleporters reported an arrival time sooner than the departure time. Turns out black holes are weird, even if they're fictional wormhole video game logic black holes, and if enough energy is allocated to one, it actually just sends things back in time. The first idea that came into my mind was to duplicate my scout friend here, by letting one arrive at the white hole and then cancelling the departure. Yeah, I might have a knack for breaking things, but the only things I can seem to break in this game are intentional. God damn these good game devs, they really get on my nerves. After sitting through an incredible kazoo cover of the main theme of the game, I was ready to try some less broken teleporters. Well, up until the point where I remembered this icy comet existed. Long story short, I go there, get inside, die to ghost matter twice like a champ, and then experience secondhand a Shakespearean-level tragedy. See, up until this point I thought the Nomai bones kinda just lounging around an Adiod place was a cultural thing, I guess? But it turns out that all it takes for a species-wide mass extinction is one high-energy comet boy. This interloper is actually the source of all ghost matter in the solar system, and it just so happens that right as the Nomai discovered how dangerous this thing was, the core ruptured open and killed them. Instantly. All those projects, plans, aspirations to find the eye of the universe, wiped out by a stupid comet. Seriously though, this is indescribably sad. The only reason us Hearthians lived is because we were still aquatic-based lifeforms at the time, and as ghost matter and water have been having border disputes since forever ago, we were spared. This is actually applicable in gameplay too in some ghost-mattered areas on Giant's Deep, which ceased the whole kill you thing while submerged. Oh yeah, the teleporter thing. I go back to Ash Twin, take the teleport to that spooky area I accidentally found earlier, and learn that the reason we're in a time loop is because of the sun going supernova. This room converts the energy from the explosion and channels it into a black hole at its center. This causes these statues which store our memories to depart from the black hole, only to arrive at their corresponding hosts 22 minutes in the past. So that statue at the very beginning of the game is why we're stuck in this loop, but why would the Nomai even want to be in this loop to begin with? Well, it all has to do with that other thing that happened at the beginning of the game. My game, at least. Remember those coordinates to the Eye of the Universe that I had completely forgotten about obtaining at this point? And the Nomai's attempts to preemptively trigger the supernova? Well, the Nomai needed those coordinates, but their only way of finding the Eye was to randomly fire off probes in different directions until they got lucky. To find the Eye reliably with their limited resources, they had to create this time loop, automatically fire a probe at the beginning of each loop, send each probe's data to a statue so it survives the loop, wait for the Eye to be found, and then manually turn off the sun station to cut the loop off. Only they failed to start the loop, and now the sun is exploding naturally, so there's no way of stopping this thing without getting roasted. Well, hopefully this Eye of the Universe thing was worth it. I headed to Dark Bramble with the warp core, as it's the only place I hadn't explored fully, and I was still missing the identification of a distress beacon resonating from within its depths. I went off to fulfill my destiny of becoming anglerfish food pretty much immediately, and may have developed mild thalassophobia in the process. This was the last game I was expecting this kind of jump scare in, so with the time loop broken, I stayed dead this time. The sun exploded, so did the rest of the galaxy's stars, then the universes until there was nothing left. That's how my story ends. Or it would have been had I not made prior contact with the local time magi to bring me back should things go awry. I retrieved the warp core for definitely the first time, and delve back into Dark Bramble. This time I make sure not to wake up the sleepy fish lest they put me to bed with them, through the use of the 9000 IQ strat of leaving the keyboard and listening to relaxing music. I reached a broken down Nomai ship, and with the power of the warp core was able to input the coordinates to the Eye of the Universe. It was the beginning of the end. And what an ending it is! If you've played the game before, you'll understand what I mean when I say I don't think it's possible to adequately describe what happens in words alone. It's just something you have to experience. But that wouldn't stop me from trying anyway. The Eye is in a constant state of flux. Things flash in and out of existence seemingly at random. The Eye does not care about your silly Hearthian feelings, even if you really want to get your friend Scout back. Rest in peace, little guy. The Eye is quite terrifying when it wants to be, but also quite beautiful too. Your existence within the Eye is like trying to find order where there is none to be found. It's complete chaos, and yet there's some inextricable hidden meaning behind all of it. I hate that I sound like a pretentious art critic right now, but I really can't find another way to describe it other than that it feels like a dream, a place where things don't have to make sense, and yet we accept them anyway. This all culminates with you reuniting with all the people you met while exploring, all of the Hearthians on the various planets, even Solanum from the Quantum Moon. And Nomai finally reached the Eye, even after their death. And the music, you finally hear everyone play together, you no longer have to complete the puzzle alone. Everyone contributes their piece, and it's absolute reverence. Of course, the Eye is quantum, it simultaneously exists in all possible states, but it can't stay like that forever, there's a conscious observer within it. We are the observer, and in a final send-off to a dying universe, we create a new one from it.